I am Ronald, the rules lawyer, and this is where I do a deep dive on the Kineticist, the new class that Pathfinder 2e has with its new book, Rage of Elements, which comes out August 3rd. This is the Element Bender. This is part 3 of a series. It's not necessary to watch the previous ones, but you may want to see them. Part 1 is an overview of the basic features of the Kineticist. Part 2 is a combat demonstration where I have 5 Kineticists fighting each other from a popular fictional television series. And this is where I do a deep dive. I'm going to do an analysis that includes observations from the combat demonstration. Then I do some build tips, and then I highlight some awesome feats that you can take with the class. On my Patreon, I have an exclusive video of me and other people from my Discord community going over the details of the class in a 3-hour stream. So first, the analysis. First, I said it was Pathfinder's Blaster Caster, and I need to clarify what I meant, because actually the Kineticist is not a spellcaster. It does have spell-like abilities. What I meant was that the Kineticist is the class for people who want to blast or otherwise use energy. It is the go-to class for a GM to present to a player who is looking for that. It is relatively simple. You don't have to deal with full spell lists as the Kineticist, but it's not completely simple as we saw in the combat demonstration, because your basic ability, Elemental Blast, can do varying amounts of damage depending on whether you do it in melee or ranged, or whether you use 1 action on it or 2 actions. The discerning Kineticist player will want to write out on their character sheet or have at the ready their different damage formulas for these situations. But I've also come to learn since making that first video and looking more at the class that it is not a one-trick pony. It's not only damage. In fact, it's one of the most diverse classes in the game. And here's a quote from an excellent draft guide to the Kineticist that I'm going to plug later in the video and also have a link to in my description, which reads, "So what is a Kineticist? A caster? A martial? A tank? A support class? Area damage dealer? Single target damage dealer? Stealth character?" Yes. It is kind of potentially all of these things, and to that list I would actually add controller as well. I did a video on the thaumaturge, which can be incredibly diverse as well, but it is decidedly a martial. And the Kineticist is not. It's something else. It is multi-talented, and this being a class-based system, it's not necessarily going to outdo certain things it does well better than classes who are dedicated to that. A Kineticist is a blend of caster and martial. Its elemental blasts are analogous to weapon strikes by martial characters, and its other impulses or Kineticist powers are analogous to spells that casters can cast. And when we look at those strikes, those elemental blasts, they do less damage if you consider action economy especially than what fighters, barbarians, and rangers can do. You cannot add property runes like flaming, wounding to your blasts, and you need to spend 2 actions to do the full potential damage you can do with them. So DPR-wise, considering the number of actions you spend, you are less efficient. On the other hand, Kineticists excel in flexibility with these blasts compared to martials. For every element except fire, you have 2 damage types that you can use with your elemental blast. You only need 1 hand free to be able to do all of your impulses, giving you a free hand to do other important things. And if you take the weapon infusion feat at level 1, you have unparalleled versatility. You can add every single physical damage type, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, to what you can do with your blasts at will. Other martials need to switch weapons in order to have that kind of flexibility. And you can switch between melee and ranged at will, even without this feat. But if you take this feat, you can add 5 different traits to your melee strikes, and your ranged strikes can adopt at will the advantages of a longbow, a short bow, and a thrown weapon. You can switch between all of these options without having to spend an action. By the way, this will be a theme in this video. I think weapon infusion's too strong. I do feel this is like 3 feats in one. But back to the point, you have unparalleled flexibility as a Kineticist that no martial can match. And we also saw in the combat demonstration that the spells, quote unquote, that they had that were not blasts are somewhat less powerful than comparable spells cast by spellcasters of their levels. First of all, I need to explain that the party's abilities pretty much were ignored by the boss because so many Kineticist abilities target fortitude and reflex saving throws, and a level 11 Kineticist can laugh off those abilities and treat a successful saving throw as a critical success. Meanwhile, our boss Kineticist, her abilities did really shine and might actually make those abilities seem more powerful than they normally are. That's how they perform when used against foes that are 3 levels lower than you are, which was the case in this demonstration. Still, what Azula could do with her abilities was less than what an 11th level spellcaster could do. If we look at Solar Detonation, in our combat demonstration, Azula, who is an 11th level character, was able to do 78 fire damage with this impulse. That is an average of 31.5 damage. An 11th level wizard, meanwhile, with their 6th rank fireball spell, can do 12d6 fire damage, which is an average of 42. We add to this the fact that Azula had to spend 3 actions instead of 2, and it has the overflow trait, causing her to lose her kinetic aura, which she'll have to spend an action to get back again. And despite the fact that it can blind or dazzle foes, it does have the incapacitation trait, which makes it less effective against higher level enemies. But if you've been following my videos, you will know the counter argument, which is that Kineticists can do these spells at will. There's no daily limit on how often they can cast them. Just give them another round to recharge in the case of 3 action overflow abilities. This is why they are the Blaster Caster. You don't have to manage spell slots and deal with Vancian casting and losing a spell after you cast it, and so on. We can say the same thing about other Kineticist abilities. Katara, our water Kineticist, had an area effect that can heal many creatures at once. It caused her to lose her aura, and arguably it has less power than the heal spell, which has incredible versatility and power. But a cleric cannot cast that at will the way Katara could with this ability. You also have utility abilities that are also at will. Powerful things like being able to fly in the case of Aang, our air kineticist. I'm not aware of any other ability at level 8 that lets you fly at will all day. There were some other strengths that were not shown in the combat demonstration. A kineticist can choose to be very tanky. Our Earth Kineticist, Toph, had the equivalent of heavy armor, which also gave her the armor specialization effect, resistance to slashing, at level 1, and was able to increase her AC further with her impulse junction. There are other elements, I'll call them the hard elements, the physical elements, wood and metal, give you similar armor abilities and also give you a elemental shield that you can even shield block with to absorb damage and restore with an action. Some kineticists can also do a good amount of debuffing and control. Earth kineticists can do an area effect that can knock enemies prone. Nearly every element has some kind of wall ability from a higher level feat. And a lot of the highest level impulses have pretty devastating control abilities that can shut down or slow enemies. And every kineticist can get essentially a permanent bonus to one skill depending on their element. By taking the skill junction for their element, they can get a permanent status bonus with that skill, and status stacks with the item bonus that they can also get from a magical item. This can make you extremely good at a particular skill. The air element lets you get this bonus in stealth, and the earth and water element can get it in athletics. And here's yet another reference to my colleague, Swing Ripper, who has jumped on top of this and says that this could be another great option for people who want to wrestle. So this is all reason to be really excited about the Kineticist and possibly playing one. You are a jack of all trades, but not in skills necessarily. That term is often used with bards and rogues. You are a jack of all trades when it comes to all of these roles in a party, especially when you take into account some of the features and feats that we'll see later on that let you switch out your impulses every morning or even in the middle of the day. Versatility is one of your strengths. And as I often like to say, versatility is its own metric of optimization. And in fact, I think even more than the thaumaturge, which I did a video of with a party of several thaumaturges, each fulfilling different roles in the party, I think a party of kineticists is even more viable. You would, however, want to find a way to be able to affect creatures mentally, either through charisma skills or mental attacks, because it's very possible to build a party of kineticists that doesn't cover those. This also means that you can probably fit a kineticist into any party composition and have it fill a certain role. Now we move on to build tips. So first, a caveat. I don't do a full survey of all of the feats and other options that you can take. One, I've had a very busy summer, and two, there's already an excellent guide that I want to point people to made by Hunter IV4. There'll be a link in the description where they go over all of the feats, elements, and other things you can take as a kineticist with a definite opinion and tier rating for each one. So the big question when you're building a kineticist is, what subclass? Do you want to be single gate or dual gate? And this feeds into which elements you want to choose, which I'll cover later. If you single gate, you get a bonus effect when you do an impulse that is 2 actions or more. If you are a single gate air kineticist, for example, you get this excellent free movement before or after you do that ability. If you do wood, you get temporary hit points equal to your level until the start of your next turn, which is an excellent defensive buff. You don't get these if you dual gate. And each element doesn't necessarily deprive you of a lot of that variety I talked about earlier. Each element has a complete toolkit that includes utility, some control, changing your own form to embody your element, so you're still versatile. Also, there's a handful of feats that are only available if you have one element only. Counter element, the ability to shut down an effect with your element trait, is one of them. And the other ones let you essentially be an elemental of your element. Now, why would you dual gate? Well, versatility is its own form of optimization. And if you just look at the list of blasts, someone who dual gates can have 4 different damage types from their blasts from level 1. And have the option of being able to do d8s of damage and also be able to blast 60 feet. Also, having 2 elements means you have more feats to choose from as you level up. And you get access to the composite blast for your combination of elements. On the theme of versatility, you do get at level 11 the ability to switch out one of your impulses during your daily preparations. At level 17, you get to do this to 2 impulses, and if you take some feats, you can switch out impulses in the middle of the day. And when you make these changes, you get to choose from any of the impulses that you qualify for, with the usual retraining restrictions. So if you're replacing a level 6 impulse, you cannot replace it with a level 18 impulse, for example. And if you dual gate, you can still get the impulse junction for one of your elements at 5th level by virtue of the Gates Threshold class feature, and we should talk about that. Gates Threshold is basically your pathing as you learn the power of the elements. You could, for example, be focused entirely on fire. You take the single gate fire element, and every time you get a threshold, and there are 4 over the course of your 1 to 20 career, you can take one of these 4 fire junctions. Or at one of these junctures, you can choose to add an element while not adding a junction. It's a trade-off. Now, this does mean it is possible to make a character that is good at every element, because you can dual gate at level 1, and because there are 4 thresholds, you can get a total of 6 elements. That seems to be a deliberate design choice. But would you want to do that? That means you get none of the junctions for any of your elements. But maybe you want to be super versatile. There is, after all, a level 20 feat we'll see later that lets you change one of your impulses to anything else you qualify for with a single action. Maybe that's something you want to do. And when you see some of these higher level impulses, it is pretty awesome to think that you have the entire library of impulses at your fingertips. What this does mean, in the end, whether you choose single gate or dual gate does not lock your character down that subclass path. You can still be something in between. A word on composite blasts. There are 15 of them, one for every combination of 2 of the 6 elements. They are all level 4 or level 6, and they all are very interesting. But there is a way for a kineticist who focuses on only one element to get these, and it's a feat that is only available to them called Elemental Overlap. It's a level 8 feat, but this is an option, and you can take it multiple times. In fact, counterintuitively, you can have more composite impulses than a kineticist who has more than one element. Okay, another important thing to think about when making your kineticist is a question that often comes up when building a martial character. Do you want to be focused on strength or dexterity? Unlike with martial characters, neither of these affects your accuracy. Your constitution score determines the accuracy of your blasts. I would argue that you do want to have a good strength, because in Pathfinder you need to have a high strength to do extra damage. There is, after all, the weapon infusion feat that lets you add your strength to ranged blasts. Also, if one of your elements is earth, metal, or wood, you can take one of the armor level 1 impulse feats to make up for that low dexterity. One other tip is to have an impulse attack that calls for a saving throw. That's because these are immune from the multiple attack penalty, and your elemental blast, meanwhile, counts as an attack and is subject to the multiple attack penalty, or as the community likes to call it, MAP. This means that you can have a turn where you don't have your aura active going into it. You channel element, get your free blast, and then do one of these impulses against your enemies. And another thing to take into account is the tension between your kinetic aura and overflow abilities. As we saw in the combat demonstration, the boss had some very powerful abilities that cost 3 actions, but also overflowed and therefore ended her kinetic aura. Her aura was very powerful, enhancing her attacks and also giving her defense. So basically, if you spec your kineticist to rely on a powerful aura, that will devalue for you the abilities that cause you to overflow, especially the ones that cost 3 actions, because you will definitely end your turn in that instance without your aura. Now the 6 elements, and I found this a difficult task because, as I said, each element in itself gives you a full toolkit that is not just damage. They all have different kinds of utility, ways to control your own form, control effects, things that affect whole groups of enemies, and ways to enhance your kinetic aura to have other effects. But each element has its own flavor, and I'm going to try to glean that from what I see. First is air, and the first thing to say about it, actually, is that its blast does d6s. It does a little less than the others, but it has a 60-foot range. And you exceed the other kineticists in mobility. You have impulses that enhance your movement and give you the ability to fly later on. There's that level 1 feat to move yourself and your allies as well. Also, your impulse junction gives you free movement either before or after an impulse that costs at least 2 actions, and that's huge. It favors a skirmisher style where you can always stay at range from the enemy at the end of your turn if you want to. The unique damage type that you can do is electricity, and there is a junction available to give you a bonus in stealth. That, combined with the feat that lets you be invisible at will, makes you a top-tier stealth class. Earth, their big strength is defense. They have a level 1 feat that gives them the equivalent of plate armor and the armor specialization effect of plate. They are a little slower in walking as a result, but yes, they are defensive and they have feats that enhance their defense. Their impulse junction gives them a +1 circumstance bonus to armor class. The D8 blast and the fact that you can have the equivalent of heavy armor means you can focus on strength and damage. They also can debuff enemies pretty well, and their skill junction is athletics. So they can use grapple, trip. They have impulses that can knock enemies prone or grapple them, or even prevent flying creatures from flying. Fire, as is to be expected, can do lots of damage. In addition to a number of damage-focused impulses, their aura can do a good deal of damage on its own. Despite what I say, there is still, as with every other element, a diverse toolkit that give utility, including some cool movement abilities. Your skill junction can be in intimidation, so this would be a great high-level scared-to-death build. Next is metal, and I found this hard to characterize. It's similar to Earth in that you get a defensive impulse that gives you an armor, and you do a d8 of damage. Their impulse junction is defensive. It lets them damage some creatures that attack them. A lot of your impulses do physical damage, and some of them do persistent damage. But yeah, I found it hard to characterize. There's a lot of feats that feel like metal. There's some that play off of the idea of magnetism. There's a cool feat called Consume Power that lets you react to several kinds of incoming energy damage that helps you resist it, but also rechannel it to enhance your next attack. Their aura can also be leveraged against enemies that are made of metal or use metal gear. Next is water, and this, together with wood, is one of the support and healing elements. Their blasts can be cold, and several of their impulses also deal with cold and ice. Your skill junction is athletics, and if you're focused on strength, which you can be really good at combat maneuvers. Your impulse junction is very useful. You get to move one of your targets 5 feet, which can put foes where they don't want to be, or put an ally where they want to be. Next is wood, which has a number of support and healing abilities, and they also have a level 1 armor impulse that gives them a shield. And their impulse junction gives them temporary hit points that last until the start of their next turn. If they're constantly using 2-action impulses, they essentially have a buffer against damage. Their theme is life and vitality damage, which is particularly effective against the undead. Still, they can make the forces of nature work against enemies and against life. So there's some harmful abilities here as well. Now let's talk about some highlights. And first, I'll start with what I call standout feats that are important to consider when building your Kineticist, and finish with some impressive feats that each element has. So the first one is, again, Weapon Infusion. I think this feat is very powerful. I feel like it's 3 feats in one, but it gives you unparalleled ability to tailor your blasts. If you want to do ranged attacks and have a higher than +0 strength, this is a straight damage buff for your ranged blasts. And also your ability to make your second attack and maybe third attack per turn more accurate is another boost. And the fact that it gives you bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage with your weapon. And this is particularly useful for fire element kineticists who by default don't have any of those types. Next is safe elements. And I glossed over this in my initial reading, but this is actually pretty important to consider. If any of you are familiar with the cleric for 1st or 2nd edition Pathfinder, this is like selective channeling. Basically, your kinetic aura, if it gives any benefits or drawbacks, you get to exclude some of the targets. At least 4, because we're going to assume your constitution score is maxed out. This not only protects your allies from harmful auras, like from our fire kineticist fire aura, but it also shields enemies from the benefits of your aura. So if you have this water kineticist aura ability to heal creatures within your aura, you can exclude enemies from that. And if you consider the fact that at level 10, there's a feat that lets you determine the radius of your aura, it's not always 10 feet anymore. You can make it smaller, and you can make it bigger, up to 25 feet radius or 30 feet radius at 20th level. That's a 65-foot diameter. This safe elements feat, which I think is a misnomer, can be very powerful. Then we have counter element, which I actually don't know if it's an important feat. I just wanted to point out something cool. Okay, so first, what it does. First, you can only get it if you are focused on one element only. And if you're affected by something that has the trait of your element, you have the chance of noping it and making it not affect you at all. And if you critically succeed, it doesn't affect anyone else. But starting at 12th level, you can kind of redirect it to another creature within 30 feet of you. And if you critically succeed, you can choose its targets or area. So that was cool. The next one is Effortless Impulse. 12th level feat. When your turn begins, you can, as a free action, sustain one of your impulses that can be sustained. And there's a lot of impulses. I haven't gone through the survey of all of them, but there's impulses like a wall of stone, or that change your form, and this frees up your action economy so that you can sustain them and do everything else you normally do, or have multiple effects that you can sustain. So this can be very useful in longer, bigger fights. Then we get to the highest levels. Rapid Reattunement, level 14. Remember what I said, versatility is its own form of optimization? Well, this lets you change one of your impulses to another one that you could learn with only 10 minutes. If your party scouts ahead, you can know in advance what challenges you'll face and key yourself to an element that triggers enemy weaknesses. Of course, the value of this feat multiplies the more elements you have. At 20th level, we have 2 capstone feats that compete for each other. First is Kinetic Pinnacle. You are permanently quickened, and this extra action, this 4th action, can only be used to channel elements or do a 1-action blast or 1-action impulse. But this is really good. There are some very powerful impulses that use 3 actions and cause you to overflow and lose your kinetic aura. With this, you can start your turn doing one of these and then channel elements so that you still benefit from your aura until your next turn, and trigger a blast or enter a stance at the same time. And if you have Effortless Impulse that lets you sustain something for free at the start of your turn, this is action economy on steroids. You are very rarely going to end your turn without your aura in effect. And then the other one competing for it, I honestly don't know which one is better, is Kineticist. This lets you replace one of your impulses with another one that you can know with a single action. So this means some of the dramatic, highest level impulses we're about to see, every element has 2 of them. You can effectively have both. It just takes you literally 2 seconds to reattune yourself. And if you are the avatar and have every element, you basically have every impulse available at your fingertips. Now for the impressive feats that I want to highlight in each element. For air, I'm going to choose a level 1 feat, 4 winds. I've talked about this already, and you saw it in the combat demo, but this is very powerful because movement costs an action. You can conserve action economy for your allies. So let's say that high-level fighter who has a 3-action activity that's very strong, like Whirlwind Strike, attack every foe within their reach. They're not perfectly positioned. You can be the one who puts them in the perfect place. And starting at 10th level, they can move their full speed instead of half their speed. Also, if you're facing a single boss creature and your party essentially is sharing the same initiative, you can do things like have everybody go all in and attack, and you delayed after them so that they can all scatter at the last moment before the boss's turn comes up. Next is the avatar form. I refuse to believe any claim that the makers of Pathfinder 2e did not watch Avatar, The Last Airbender. You become one with a devastating thunderstorm from the plane of air. You place a crown of lightning upon your brow, sparks flash in your eyes, and lightning strikes constantly in the air around you as howling winds lift you from the ground. So you can fly, your eyes glow. You'll also get a bonus to your speeds, and you do electricity damage to any creature within your aura, and do extra electricity damage with your blasts. Very cool. And remember, at level 19, there's a class feature you get that every Kineticist gets to channel elements at the start of your turn as a free action. Channel elements lets you, for free, do a stance impulse like this. You can be this every turn. The other level 18 feat competing for your attention is Infinite Expanse of Bluest Heaven. I teased this in part 1 of this series. It's the coolest name in the game, and I'm convinced that the designers have played Spirit Island, which is an excellent board game that I recommend to all viewers. Anyway, this is 3 actions. It causes you to overflow, and I just have to read this. An illusion of a limitless expanse with an impossibly blue sky makes all within feel the sensation of falling forever. It's a 20-foot burst within 100 feet, and it's an illusion, but every creature has to do a will save. And even if they succeed, they are off guard. But if they fail, they also flee. They try to flee that sky, but they are so disoriented that they flee inside the area. It is very likely they do get out of the area, but you've cost them at least 1 action, and this does not have the incapacitation trait. So this is one of those higher level Kineticist impulses that does a great job at control. Next is Earth, and for them, I wanted to highlight a couple of feats that enhance their form. First, Assume Earth's Mantle. It makes you large, which is cool, and you can climb, and you get, this is unheard of, a +1 item bonus to your strength. That's like what you would get from a level 17 Apex item, but you get it at level 14. So this is further evidence that the Earth Kineticist may be the best class and subclass for wrestling in the game. Then there's a level 18 feat, Rebirth in Living Stone. It's a different stance, but it gives you 40 temporary hit points and you're immune to critical hits. I am not aware of any other effect that does this in the game. Someone in the comments will find something though, I'm sure. You're also immune to precision damage, and you cannot be pushed, pulled, or tripped at all. So that is very cool flavor-wise and mechanically. You also do extra damage with your Earth Blasts, but this needs to be sustained. So this pairs well with Effortless Impulse. Next is Fire, and they have this level 18 feat called Ignite the Sun. This is Flaming Sphere on steroids. Basically, they get to create a miniature sun in a 5-foot burst, 500-foot range, that does damage. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but it's really cool because when you sustain it, it increases in size, and it flies somewhere for 30 feet. And there's nothing preventing you from having multiple suns. So this is 2 actions. If you have Effortless Impulse, you can build up to have suns flying around the battlefield of different sizes. One of them is 55-foot radius. Also, you and your allies within the sun's light, it has a 500-foot radius of light, does extra fire damage. Next is Metal, and they too have a cool high-level attack called Hell of 1,000,000 Needles. It costs 3 actions, and it has Overflow, but it has a range of 500 feet, and you create a cube 30 feet per side. It does damage, but it can also impale them and immobilize them. You can cast this from a big distance, and this does not have the incapacitation trait, so you can make that ancient worm dragon stuck. And every time you sustain it, you can have lightning crisscrossing the needles, doing electricity damage. If they want to do any move action, they're going to have to escape, which has the attack trait, and it's against your class DC, which in another level is going to be legendary. This is a hugely powerful control and debuff ability. Next is Water, and this is called Usurp the Lunar Rains. This is basically a utility ability. It has limited use in combat, but its effects can be permanent and campaign world changing. You can create water, you can raise or lower its level, you can make it churn or be calm, and any water creatures in the area are slowed. This costs 3 actions and you overflow. This is first of all really cool thematically, and while it is niche, remember starting at level 11 you're able to train into or train out of any impulse you have. And from a design level you can see why they put that ability in so that you can freely choose utility powers without feeling like you're sacrificing more combat focused ones. Lastly, we look at Wood, which has Sanguivalent Roots. This is a cool name, first of all. We have to acknowledge that name. But this is 3 actions and Overflow. But this is Vampirism. Blood-drinking vines grow in an area and takes life from the living and confers that health to other creatures in the area, so your allies. This life force also does damage to the undead. And in case there's any confusion, yes, when you lose your aura, you can still sustain impulses you started while having your aura. And lastly, we have Turn the Wheel of Seasons. 3 actions, Overflow. You make the seasons shift in a cube 100 feet in each dimension. It goes through the cycle of 4 seasons, and you get to choose which season to start in. Spring, every ally gets temporary hit points, and it helps stabilize dying allies. Summer, everyone is exposed to sunlight, and they can be dazed or blinded, and it only affects enemies. Autumn, leaves and rain make everything concealed, and every enemy is slowed 1 unless they make a saving throw, and there's no incapacitation trait here, and slowed 1 is very powerful. And with winter, they take cold damage and persistence cold damage if they fail their saving throw. But yeah, this is a very thematic and cool effect that selectively affects enemies and selectively helps your allies. So that's really powerful. So that's my overview of the Kineticist, the end of the 3-part series. I hope you enjoyed it. Are there things I missed? Do you disagree with me on anything? Comment below, and also talk about what kind of Kineticist you want to build. I want to see your comments. If you enjoyed my channel, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for future offerings. If you haven't yet, join my Discord where you can find others who want to play Pathfinder 2e. There's a great community there that likes to talk about this game and other TTRPGs and other hobby games. You can also find people who will want to GM the beginner box, or just GM. There's a drop-in organized play system called Endless Tale Tavern, where you can take your character from adventure to adventure, gathering XP and treasure on the way. And support my Patreon if you haven't already. Again, there's the exclusive 3-hour stream where people on my Discord and I go through the features and feats of the Kineticist. And if you are tier 2 or higher, you get exclusive access to the 2 campaigns I'm running of D&D YouTubers who are experiencing Pathfinder 2nd Edition for the first time. So that's it. I have been Ronald, the Rules Lawyer, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.